Thank you, choir. So in the American Southwest, where I grew up, there are still a lot of remote places that have unpaved roads. Most of them are on farms and ranches. And out there is an old saying. It's called being stuck on high center. So picture this, high center is that part of a dirt road right down the middle of the dirt road between the deep ruts where the wheels of vehicles have made depressions in the dirt. So if you're unfortunate enough for the axle of your car or truck not to be high enough off the ground, you can literally become stuck on high center with your tires just spinning in the air while you are going absolutely nowhere. And a person is said to be on high center when they're immobilized somehow, paralyzed. It could be they can't make up their mind, or their mind might be made up, but they can't figure out how to proceed. They'd like to move either forward or even backward for that matter. Any movement at all would be nice, but they just can't budge. It's never a good feeling to be stuck on high center. It can happen in our relationships when we know things need to be resolved, they need to be healed. But we just don't know how to make that happen. It can happen in a job when we're unsatisfied, but we don't see a way forward. And it's frustrating because we spend a great deal of our time imagining the immediate or the distant future. So while what's going to happen next is never something we can predict with 100% accuracy, we can still dream and plan and envision. Hopefully, what we envision and anticipate is a positive thing. So we don't waste too much time worrying or being anxious about what's to come. We anticipate the future in positive ways. And at the same time, as powerful as our ability is to imagine the future, a great deal of our mental and emotional space is taken up by our memories, by our experiences of living. And that means whatever we believe about our future is always very naturally informed by our past. That only makes sense. If a child learns early on that a flame is hot and it burns and it hurts whenever she sees a candle burning, she knows not to place her finger over it because the first time she ever did that, ouch. That's one of the biggest challenges, though, being a person of faith, because having faith in anything at all means that you must put aside whatever your previous experience has taught you in order to move forward, to get off high center. Faith, as the Apostle Paul says, is believing in what is unseen. Or he could have just as well said, it's believing in an outcome that our experience has already taught us is unlikely, maybe even downright impossible. As I was thinking about this week, of all people, Ruth Bader Ginsburg kept popping into my head. And I appreciate how her life story demonstrates the concept of believing in something very unlikely, but then pursuing it anyway. Because who would have ever thought that a 5-foot-tall woman from Brooklyn would be the driving force behind changing our laws that discriminated against people in the workplace based on their gender? When she was at Harvard Law School back in 1956, a tough place to get into even then, and she was one of only 9 women in a class of 500, the law school dean asked her, "Why are you here taking the place of a man?" That was the wrong thing to say to her. To someone who had already been fired from a job for being pregnant, but who had enormous faith in herself. Even with a Harvard law degree, she had trouble finding work because she was a woman. She was denied clerkships with judges because she was a woman. When she did find work, she was paid less than her male colleagues doing the exact same work because she was a woman. So she had plenty of experiences that told her that women were not valued as highly as men in our society. That she believed in something that was unseen anyway. And later, in taking discrimination cases before the Supreme Court and winning, long before she ever sat on the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg made her steadfast belief in a better and more justice-filled world for all of us a reality. That is about as good of a definition of faith as I can think of. Her story is precisely how faith works. Faith is not some privately held belief system, as in, I have faith in one set of religious doctrines or in this one way of thinking about God. Now, those are your religious beliefs. That's not faith. Because faith is an outcome driven by conviction. Faith is not some wispy and ephemeral thing. Faith is concrete action. Whenever we say, I had faith that it would happen, whatever it is, or I have faith that you can do it, that's so powerful. That is energy that drives accomplishment. That's faith. And that's why it's kind of funny whenever I hear anyone talking about their faith as being something dependable and comforting. I know and appreciate that what they mean by that when they say that they believe deeply in certain things. For instance, they believe in God's presence and love, and that's a source of great comfort. And that's all awesome and very important, but of course there's actually much more to faith than that. Faith is that quality of living that requires us to take leaps into the unknown, to believe in what's unseen, and to put aside our doubts and fears and just plunge ahead anyway, no matter what our experience has taught us, to get beyond our comfort zone. I'm sort of a collector of ideas about ways we can improve our lives, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And for me, at least, one of my self-improvement areas, something that I work on, is to consistently try to find the courage and the commitment and the trust to have faith. To not allow my past experiences to shut me off from believing in what's possible. And importantly, to have faith that whatever I may do in the future, that it won't just turn out the way that I need, but that it'll be the way the world needs me to be and to act. And by the future, I mean, well, later today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, all of the above. And by the world, when I say the world, I mean, well, my wife, my family, my relationships, my work, and how I might make some positive difference in the very precious time I have while I'm still visiting this planet in the flesh. I would love to have the perspective every day of the person who wrote Psalm 98. What Linda read for us today. When the psalmist said, oh, sing to the Lord a new song, not an old song, a new song, not a comforting old hymn, as great as those are, but a new composition that might take me some time and effort to learn how it goes. This particular psalm is giving thanks to God's steadfast love of promises made real, so it's grounded very much in past experiences that have been very positive. But sing a new song, because great stuff has happened, and that's not unusual. When your team wins the World Series, you might burst into song. In a Hollywood musical, if Debbie Reynolds kisses Gene Kelly, he's going to dash right out there in the rain and start singing. I would too. And Psalm 98 seems to acknowledge that the creativity and joy required to come up with something new, to forge ahead in faith, comes only when our experience has been positive. But here's the thing, what about when life has not always been a bed of roses? How do we sing a new song then? And how do we have the faith to get off high center? Apparently that's a popular question. Online you can find any number of people who call themselves things like action philosophers or life coaches, who promise to help you have faith in yourself in the future and to act on that faith. For instance, a relatively common thing, life experience, is getting fired from a job. That happens to a lot of folks, and that can be devastating for anyone, but especially if your sense of identity or self-worth was really tied up in that title and having that job. So when that happens, it's very common to feel stuck, not knowing how to move forward. But looking back on that experience, you might also be able to see that having your sense of identity or self-worth so closely tied up in a job, any occupation, that was really an illusion, because no one is the occupation they practice. And if you can see that, now you've been set free from the need to value yourself based on what you do for a living. That's so important. And a change of perspective like that takes what had been a negative experience that impacted your beliefs about yourself and recasts it into a greater appreciation that your life has value and has meaning and that you are worthy regardless of any job you've got. And that frees you up to sing a new song. Another exercise a life coach might offer is to find a photo of yourself from the time you were between, let's say, 7 and 10 years old. And imagine having a conversation with your young self, with yourself at that age. What would you say to that younger person, that you, knowing what you know now about what they're going to go through and what they'll face in life, what kind of advice would you give them? Again, that forces you to think about the journey that you've been on, everything that you've learned, all the positive experiences, right along with all the challenges. There'd be some things you would say to your younger self in the hope that your younger self would do things differently to avoid regrets, of course. But things being what they are, and we can't change our past, that imaginary conversation helps us appreciate our own unique story, our own unique experiences. It helps us realize that despite all of our past anxiety about what may come, things typically work out. We survive. Now, not without bumps and bruises. That is the price we pay for living. What matters today is far less about what's happened to us than our personal perspective on those experiences, how we feel about ourselves, and actually appreciating what we've learned about what matters most. How did that thing happen that happened? How did it help you become wiser, more capable? What changes did you make afterwards? Did even a negative experience teach you, inform you? How can you use that knowledge? There's great freedom in doing that, realizing that we can actually change how we feel about our past. We can change the emotional responses that crop up by just sitting with that experience, feeling the discomfort and the pain and even the loss, but still appreciating how it might have helped us grow. At the very least, we can cultivate compassion for ourselves. That's so, so important. We can look back and see that hurting and frightened person we have been and maybe still are, and see with greater objectivity what happened to us and even the mistakes we made. And be reminded, that the world just causes us pain sometimes. And that we are imperfect and we mess up sometimes. But none of that means that we are any less worthy of love. None of that means we should be hard on ourselves for how we navigated a difficult time. Second guessing is wasted energy. If we can get there, we can begin to find gratitude for having been through it all and coming out on the other side. That's when getting off high center can happen, and that's when we can feel inspired to sing a new song, unafraid of the unseen, not shackled down by what our experience tells us. Instead, we're empowered by a new perspective of what our experience has taught us. Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we should never be limited by what anyone tells us we can or cannot do. Oh no. Now, in several weeks, we are going to be in the season when Foothills asks all of us to look forward into what's unseen, to really think about our hopes and dreams and intentions for this ministry together, and how each of us can play a part in that through our financial support. Maybe we ought to look at it this way. Let's picture ourselves a year from today and picture ourselves looking at a photograph of us today and our church today. What kind of conversation would we have with our slightly younger selves? What will we have learned? What were we anxious about that in hindsight really didn't amount to as much as we thought, and we got through it just fine? What were we hopeful about back in September of 2025? And how will we feel a year from now about the choices that we made today? Appreciative, joyful, filled with gratitude? You know what? It's up to you and me to write that story. And the truth is, we're making history right now. We're already writing a new song, and we're already learning the lyrics even as we go. I have faith in the unseen. I have faith in our future together. I have faith in all that God's doing in us and through us individually and collectively. Because God is not done with anybody. None of us are stuck on high center. No, we are rolling and we are singing a new song. Amen.